everyone, welcome back to another installment of Zilog and Moto, the weekly show that documents my adventures building a complete English language collection of Master System, Genesis, Sega CD, and 32X titles, and then playing and reviewing them. And in most of these cases, playing a lot of these titles for the first time and getting to see what I missed out on so many years ago and only saw in magazines or on store shelves, if I even knew about them at all in the case of a lot of these European titles. For some reason, the magazines in the United States at the time were hyper-focused on the Japanese market instead of the European market, so while I might have known about something like Double Dragon 2 for the Mega Drive, Sonic 2 for the Master System? Not so much. Anyway, if going on this journey sounds interesting at all to you, I recommend that you subscribe so that you'll know when new videos go up, because while I always try to get new ones posted on Monday or Tuesday morning, you never know when life might go a little sideways, or maybe when a bonus video or two gets released, who knows. For this week's video, we're looking at the 31st Master System title in my list so far, and one that's a little bit unusual at that. A few months ago in episode 102, I reviewed Monopoly for the Master System. Monopoly was a bit special because it was the rare case of an incredibly popular license, but at the time, the Master System version was the only way to play it on a console, because while it would eventually appear on the NES, Genesis, and a slew of other consoles, for a few years it was only available on the Master System, flipping the script on what usually benefited the NES. This occurred because Parker Brothers had licensed the title to Sega to develop, and they must have liked the outcome because Parker Brothers again decided to work with Sega a few months later, but this time on a title that isn't quite as well known as being associated with them. In 1985, Broderbund Software released Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego for the first time for the Apple II and DOS, and then followed up shortly thereafter with a release on the Commodore 64, which is where I first played it. A lot of edutainment titles run into the issue of being too simple or boring, so even with target audiences that they're designed for, they end up getting discarded rather quickly and replaced by whatever was just shoveled out the next year. But the Carmen Sandiego series stumbled onto a formula that was engaging and sometimes challenging, which resulted in people actually learning as a byproduct of having fun. As you can imagine, this led to the game eventually receiving all sorts of sequels, like Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, Where in the USA is Carmen Sandiego, and of course the combination of those two, Where in America's Past is Carmen Sandiego. The series was so popular it even spawned a hit kids game show on PBS starring Greg Lee and Lynn Thigpen, who both had long-running careers outside the show. And then that show ran for 5 years, from 91 to 95. And then later on, multiple animated shows based on it, including one that's currently airing on Netflix. To tie this back to the Master System release, like Monopoly, the Master System was the only way to play a version of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego on a console for 4 years, until the Genesis version would be released by Electronic Arts. And yes, there was technically a TurboGrafx/PC Engine CD release that came out in 1990 in Japan, but come on, no one knew that existed. Although, if you're curious, it does have an English mode, surprisingly enough, and I'm actually kind of shocked that it didn't come out here. Adding to the weird exclusivity to the title, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego was also initially only released for the Master System in the United States, and never got a PAL release, one of the few Master System games to do so. I guess from now on, when someone from Europe brags about a great Master System game that only they got, I've now got something else to come back with besides ALF. Okay, enough about all that. Let's get to the review and see how this version of the game holds up. But first, our traditional look at the package. And here is my copy of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, and thankfully this one is in really good shape. I can't remember where I bought this, if it was from a convention or eBay, but I'm pretty certain it was not a local shop. No scratches or dings to the outer cover, although the hang tab has been removed, but at least it's pretty clean cut. Along with the nice condition of the outer cover, the inner cover is in great shape as well, with no edge wear, water, or sun damage. Just a great looking release that mirrors how it looked on the store shelf 33 years ago. Man, I'm old. Anyway, when you see this release, you might be somewhat confused. The first thing that probably seems a bit odd is that this version of the game eschews the original cover, which is somewhat iconic, I've got to be honest, because it was used on most versions of the game for almost 10 years. This cover instead is still pretty good, featuring Carmen Sandiego in her signature red hat and Rolls Royce, and then her pendant, the Moon of Moldavia, on top of a map of the Earth, with the 30 cities that you visit in the game, all surrounded by a diamond necklace that I actually didn't pick up on until writing this. So that's a nice touch as well. Despite it not being the original cover, I think it looks pretty great as far as Master System releases go, and still adheres to the classic Master System background with the white cross-hatching. One other thing to note is that since this is one of the rare US third-party releases for the console, it has the Parker Brothers logo on both the front and the spine, where normally Sega would go. Although even that's questionable, since technically Parker Brothers was part of Tonka at the time, which was handling the Master System's distribution in the United States during that time period. So I'm not sure if this should be considered a third-party title or not. Flipping over to the rear cover, and whoa, that is a lot of text. While these 3 massive paragraphs accurately explain the game and what you'll be doing, clearly the designers didn't realize that on these rear covers, in flavor text, less is more. Most kids are going to see this and just completely glaze over. However, there is this nugget in here: collect pertinent facts from the special almanac. Well, that's interesting, as unlike most versions of this game, this edition does not come with the World Almanac, which is normally included in an oversized box. More on that in a second, but to wrap things up back here, there's also 3 screenshots included that aren't bad, but are clearly taken from a camera just pointed at a TV screen. Opening the box up, and there's some more oddities here. First off, what should stand out immediately and add confusion to this is a first-party or third-party title, is that the label on the cartridge is not in red or blue, as you would expect from Sega, but instead white, like what would be used on other third-party releases in Europe, for instance Gauntlet that I reviewed back in episode 41. Beyond that, however, how about this dual manual situation? Well, to be clear, this isn't 2 manuals, this is a manual and the almanac referred to on the rear cover. Rather than include the full World Almanac, instead what we have here instead is a pamphlet on the 30 countries featured in the game with red highlights instead of the traditional Sega blue, with facts about each and a full color layout of their flags. I definitely prefer having the full World Almanac, but this gets the job done, is informative, and is more direct and to the point as to providing assistance with the clues in the game. The manual, which is in great shape like the rest of the package, features red coloring instead of blue like the almanac. And this is a great manual. It's a bit text heavy, but there's also some nice backstory here, a map showing all the cities you'll visit, some nice game tips, and finally a breakdown of the 10 criminals you'll be attempting to chase down, which might give you the upper hand in getting an arrest warrant signed. Okay, that's the unexpectedly nice package. Let's get to the game and see how this port holds up, and if there's anything specifically that makes it stand out. As I mentioned previously, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego is what I would consider an edutainment game, with a definite focus on learning facts about various countries around the world to allow you to progress in the game with a shot at eventually taking down head honcho herself, Carmen Sandiego. And also, fun fact is something I didn't realize for over 30 years playing this game and watching various TV shows, Carmen's last name is Sandiego, all one word, not San Diego, like the home of Pat Contry and Ian Ferguson. Shout out to the Completely Unnecessary podcast. Really, Broderbund, was it a good idea to name a character that was designed to be educational something that doesn't match the real world and confuse kids as to how to write the name of the city? I guess it doesn't matter, seeing as how I never caught it until doing this review, but still, it's the principle of the thing. Anyway, let's move on. The cover of the game refers to it as a text-adventure action game for the Sega system. And I suppose that's kind of right. However, even that is a bit confusing for most gamers of a certain age, as the Carmen Sandiego series is made up of games decidedly not in the text-adventure genre, which is more commonly represented by the Zork series and other Infocom titles like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Leather Goddesses of Phobos. And yes, Leather Goddesses of Phobos is a real game, it's hilarious, and you should definitely check it out. Okay, so if Carmen Sandiego isn't a text adventure, much less action, more on that in a bit, what is it? Well, the original Carmen Sandiego games, I would say, are closer to point-and-click adventure titles, as there's no parser for you to type commands, and everything that occurs in the game is a result of you clicking on various buttons on the screen. Specifically, for Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, you are a detective who is trying to track down Carmen's various lackeys as they commit various heists and general mischief. To accomplish this task, you are plopped into the city where the heist takes place, and then are given the option to choose to investigate 3 places in that city and interview the people that are looking for clues, all at the click of a button. Then, based on those interviews, you have to do 2 things. Collect information to figure out just which of Carmen's thieves has done the dirty deed, and then also get clues onto where they're onto next, based on the flights that are available at the local airport. And while there is a lot of text involved in reading the case summaries and talking to the locals to deduce whom to go after and where to go next, if you're just clicking buttons, it's point and click. To me anyway. I'm sure there's others that might have a different view, and if you do, feel free to let me know about it in the comments. Anyway, that's all the original version of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego that appeared on various home computers and, interestingly enough, accurately ported to the Genesis and Super Nintendo in 1992/1993. But not the NES, as it only got Where in Time as Carmen Sandiego. So, what is this Frankenstein's monster of a game for the Master System that's been branded a mishmash of text adventure action? Well, let's just say a few liberties were taken with the game, as it was developed by Venture Technologies for Parker Brothers. Throwing out the already discussed text adventure portion, the action piece is what's new for the game. As part of the original formula for the Carmen Sandiego titles, you have a limited amount of time to track down and capture the thief, with that period consisting of starting on Monday morning and then running until Sunday evening. And if you're not able to successfully capture the thief by that Sunday deadline, they get away and you fail your case, having to pick up and start again with the next one. Time passes in the game by speaking with the various locals and cities to get clues, having the computer to check the clues to determine and possibly issue a warrant for a specific crony, and flying from city to city, with longer flights not necessarily having accurate flight times, as that would break the game, but still taking more hours than just short hops. Also, to stay in tip-top crime-fighting shape, you have to sleep 9 hours a day as well, that unfortunately isn't merged in with flight times. Sleeps for 9 hours a day, every night, not including plane naps? That might be more impressive to me than actually being a detective. Anyway, this time mechanic, especially in the original game, is the main enemy, rather than the actual thieves. Interviewing witnesses can really add up, so it's important to try to get evidence as to who committed the crime early, so that later visits to cities can be used to just determine what city to head to next, and possibly require only one questioning rather than all 3. It's a silly thing, but any time in the game that I end up in 3 different countries in one day, it's exciting to know that I'm hot on the thieves' trail. But also, it's important to not jump to conclusions. For instance, if you interview someone and they say they saw a flag on their vehicle that had a red, black, and white flag, and both Baghdad and Cairo are options on the flight board, it's much more important to go and find a second witness, rather than just guess between the 2 and potentially land in the wrong country, forcing you to fly back and try again. What does all this have to do with the action portion that's been apparently added to this version of the game? Well, apparently the developers decided that the original formula of the game needed to be tweaked to keep console gamers interested. Hindsight being 2020, this clearly wasn't the case, but I can at least understand the viewpoint. To deal with that possibility, rather than have the game be based around pointing and clicking, when in cities, you now control your gumshoe and walk left and right between 5 areas: the airport, 3 locations to interview witnesses, which change with each city, and then a phone booth for connecting into the crime database to figure out who you might be after this time. Along with walking left and right, you can also move up and down on the screen, which is important, because when you're on the right path, low-level thugs will pop in while you're walking around and throw knives at you, which you must avoid or lose hours of time recuperating. This ratchets up when you reach the final city of the chase, as now you no longer have to worry about thugs, you have to worry about the thief taking shots at you, which you have to either try to duck under or jump over, or else you'll lose lots of time, which might be especially short at that point. Eventually, when you avoid enough shots, the cops will come and arrest the criminal, assuming you didn't mess up and get a warrant for the wrong thief, and you'll get a pat on the back from Interpol and move on to the next case. Personally, as a fan of the series, I think all this is highly unnecessary, as the game is fine on its own and has been evidenced by its lasting popularity. I respect the developer's decision to try to take a chance, and again, I understand why they did it, but if they wanted to make the game more challenging, they should have just made the time element more restrictive, as the action portion is frustrating at best, and then boring once you figure out how to deal with the enemies, as it's always the same. But this is what makes the Master System version unique, and if you're looking for an oddity in the series, and something that stands out, well, here you go. Also, one other smaller note, in the original game, you start off at Acme Detective Agency as a rookie, and then you must solve cases to move up the ranks from Sleuth, Private Eye, Investigator, and then finally Ace Detective, with each level requiring more cases to solve to get to that point, before eventually having to solve 8 cases as an Ace Detective to go after Carmen herself. However, as you can imagine, this all takes time, and while you could save your game on home PC versions, there's no password or battery backup here. Instead, the Master System allows you to pick which level you start on, in case you just want to cut to the chase, so to speak. But starting from rookie level works as well. While I definitely prefer the original design, this is at least a decent workaround, but just keep in mind that if you start straight in at Ace Detective level, you're probably still going to need at least an hour to work through the caseload, and it took me 2.5 hours to complete a whole game. Thankfully, the developers included a speed option on button 2 of the controller, and that's definitely helpful to get through certain animations or walk around the cities quicker, but just keep in mind those time figures that I quoted are with liberal use of that feature. Graphically, the game isn't very impressive, and sometimes you're definitely having to look pretty hard to see what's going on. While I do like little details of each cities looking different, having landmarks in them, and then having night and day versions depending on what time it is, the game simply isn't going to win any beauty contests, and what's worse, it looks like a 16-color EGA DOS title. Compounding matters, all the sounds in the game are rudimentary at best, not straying too far from generic beeps and clicks, with no music other than the intro fanfare. I've got a feeling that loading all the clues in the game took far longer than any graphic or audio design aspects. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego for the Master System is disappointing. It's not a bad game, and is somewhat faithful to the original, so at least it has a good, entertaining base, with some wacky humor thrown in from time to time, usually regarding the item that was stolen. But if they were going to go down the road of making their own game, just with the original concept as a base, it needed to be a lot better than this. To sum up my feelings, imagine this. I sit down to do a full playthrough of the game, which took just shy of 2.5 hours. I finally get to the last case, excited that I'm finally going after Carmen. She gets arrested, I get a brief congratulatory note from Acme, and the game goes back to the title screen. No ending, no credits, no game over, nothing at all to acknowledge the last 150 minutes of my life, other than that brief line about finally capturing Carmen. It's almost enough to make me give the game a worse rating out of spite, but no, I'm going to give the game 2 stars, and then just shake my head and walk away. Okay, that was Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego for the Master System, which just goes to show that while some of these releases can be interesting little curiosities, sometimes there's a reason why they're that way. I think I would have much rather just had a straight port of the Commodore 64 version, which admittedly was a bit on the weak side itself, but at least it was true to the series. I'll definitely be interested to play the Genesis version in 100 episodes or so, which I actually don't have yet, as I've only been able to track down the big box version of Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego so far. And even for this, I had to purchase the Atlas separately. Also, if you're picking up one of these for yourself and want to order a box protector for it, take a look at the original Amiibo box sold by RetroProtection.com. They're not a sponsor or anything, but Dan from there was very helpful in figuring this out, and while it's not perfect, it does get the job done. Next week on Zilog and Moto, it's time to mix things up a bit and take advantage of having this fully refreshed Tower of Power to do something I've only done once on the channel so far, and that's veer back into the world of the 32X. I do have 38 more titles on the list to get through, which is more or less everything released for the console, except Star Wars Arcade, which is the lone review so far back in episode 50, and I'll be skipping the Romance of Three Kingdoms 4, as it's impossible to find, and I can't read Japanese. So, no time like the present to get another one done, and it's a racing title, which I usually enjoy. Usually. Please remember to subscribe if you like this video, and remember, whatever you like to play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.